Hello YouTuber friends, today I'm going to talk to you about whole foods versus processed foods versus ultra processed foods versus chemicals. I promote a whole food plant-based diet. What does that mean? What is whole food, what is processed food, what is ultra processed food, and what are chemicals? So this video I'm just going to go through the basics of what I mean by those different terms and why those different stages of production have different nutritional value. Okay, so let's start with an example of tomatoes. So this is a plum cherry tomato picked straight off the plant. It's in its complete whole form in its natural state. This is a whole food. It exists in nature without any influence of man. These can exist, and then you can pick them directly and eat them with no further processing. And this is called a raw vegan diet if you eat purely whole raw foods. Most people cook food, so the next level, unless you're eating raw food, so most people eat apples completely raw in their original form. You can cut them and cook them and various other processes, but most people understand that this is a raw whole vegetable, or fruit and vegetables, and all the different varieties of leaves, salad leaves. They're all in their natural state, they're raw and they're complete as we find them. And if you eat them in their complete original form, you get all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the amino acids, all the fats, all the sugars, all the proteins, everything that's in that fruit you will absorb into your body. They also have fiber, which is really important for feeding the gut microbiome and also giving you something to push on, because it doesn't get digested, it stays in the gut and gives you some solid poop. So the first stage of processing is usually cutting and cooking, and this is just tomatoes that have been cut and cooked and put in a can for convenience, but it's still a whole food. It's just tomatoes that have been cut up and cooked. So there's been no removing of any part of the tomato. It's just a complete tomato that's been processed to a small degree by cutting and cooking it. And then we go to a further processing step to make tomato passata. At this point you're starting to remove original components of the plant. So now we're removing the skin and we're removing the seeds. So this is now a more concentrated version of a whole tomato. So it's now missing some components and it's now ultra purified, so this is just basically liquid. There's no chewing needed for this, it just gets absorbed much easier than a whole vegetable would, or a whole fruit would be in your digestive systems. If you eat a whole tomato, you've got to chew it with your teeth to process it, to break it down into smaller pieces, but this is done in a machine which is making the smallest pieces possible. And then another layer of processing on top of that is when you take something like tomato passata and then you concentrate it. So a lot of people see orange juice from concentrate, where they take oranges, juice them, process them, remove the water, transport that juice to another facility where they re-add water to it. Well, tomato puree is basically tomato passata, which has been concentrated into a more nutritionally dense format. So there's less water in here and there's more plant material. And then the next stage of processing is where it becomes an ultra processed food which no longer remotely resembles the ingredients that it's originally made from. A good example of that is the most delicious thing on earth, ketchup. I put ketchup on everything. I'm not saying ketchup is bad for you, although it's full of sugar, but it's one of the most addictive foods that I've ever eaten, and I love it, and I put ketchup on everything. The ketchup is as far from a whole food as you can get in terms of what's made from tomatoes, because this is tomato puree, which is the most concentrated form of tomatoes, but then it adds vinegar, which is a chemical. It's ethanoic acid or acetic acid. It's 2 carbons with hydrogens and oxygens around it, and it has absolutely loads of sugar. This is 23% sugar. And there's some salt and other flavourings and spices in there. You cannot make ketchup at home from raw ingredients. You could, but you would need a massive amount of equipment to be able to make sugar. Because sugar on its own is basically taken from either sugar cane or sugar beet, which is then processed in a massive factory, and through various stages it's purified and purified and purified until you just end up with pure sucrose. You can't make pure sucrose in your kitchen, right? You could if you were a chemist and you knew what you were doing and you had loads of equipment, you could possibly do it, but no normal person is going to have the equipment to be able to make sugar. So it can only be made in a factory. And if it can only be made in a factory with really intensive processing, then it's a highly ultra-processed food. So this is an ultra-processed version of tomatoes. In their original form, they contain far more nutrients and all the things that your body actually needs, like complete cells. And they're removing all the cells, we're removing the cell walls, we're removing the original water that's in there, and we're concentrating everything, and we're adding other ingredients which are factory produced in order to make it really delicious and tasty. And this is absolutely delicious and tasty, and I absolutely love ketchup. So this is an example of the stages of processing. If you look at these first two, these are actually whole foods. There's no parts removed, and then you get more highly processed where parts are starting to be removed, and then highly processed where parts are removed and other things, other man-made substances are added to the product. If you look at soy as another example, original soy is a bean. You can't eat a soybean in this form. It'll break your teeth, and it's probably not going to taste very nice, and it's probably not all that healthy either. So the only way to eat soybean is to cook them and process them. So in order to make soy milk, you take a soybean and you boil it, and then you put it in a blender and you make a liquid soup of it, and then you filter out all of the cell walls, all the cellulose, all the fibre. You take all the fibre out using I've got one in here. You can use a nut milk bag if you're trying to do this at home. This process you can do at home. This process you can't. So, in order to make soy milk, you cook and blend and sieve all the solid material out, and then you end up with soy milk. And then if you want to use soy milk in your tea or coffee or on your cereal, it's in this form, it can be consumed straight away, or you can turn soy milk into tofu. So in order to do that, then all you do is you add a chemical to the soy milk which coagulates all the proteins, and it basically sticks them together. And then you filter out the liquid and compress it, and you end up with a block of tofu. You can make tofu at home. It's not a massively complicated process. It is a processed food, but it's not ultra processed food. When we come to the next stage, we take the soybean and we're actually trying to remove as many parts of the plant as necessary to get the pure protein. This is 50% protein now. It still has some fibre, but it is engineered to have a specific texture. So in the plant where they make this, they're taking an original soybean, they're removing parts of the soybean, and they're processing the remaining components in order to make a textured version of the protein, so it more resembles meat. So this is like having ground beef. It just absorbs the flavour of whatever you put it with. And then the next stage of processing on top of that is to turn the soya protein into a pure extracted powder. So this is soy protein. This is actually strawberry flavoured, so it's highly processed to remove everything except for the soy protein. That's, this is, I don't know what percent protein, maybe 20% protein, and now we're getting to this, which is closer to 80% protein or maybe even more, and then adding chemicals to make it edible, because pure protein is absolutely disgusting. But if you have a different version, which this one is an unflavoured version, it's a mix of multiple different protein powders from beans and peas or hemp or something. I can't remember what this one's made of, but this is a blend of several different plants that have been extracted to make a powder. And this one has flavourings, sweeteners and other components to make it so you can have it in a milkshake version. This is super easy for your body to break down. There's no cell wall to protect the inside contents of the cell. There's no cells anymore. It's just a part of the cell that's been extracted, purified and made into a powder, which means there's no chewing involved. It just goes straight in and your stomach will basically, what it does is it's called denaturing. The acidity of the stomach basically affects the hydrogen bonding in the molecule of the protein and lets it unravel and spread out, and then the enzymes can come along and chop the chain of protein into amino acids. So this is really easy to digest, and it also spikes your dopamine, because any high concentration of protein, once it gets into the gut, the amino acids get detected, and every time the amino acids there, it's like, oh yeah, I like this, do it again, and it promotes you to eat more food. So if you look at how things change nutritionally along the process, if you have pure raw tomato, it's approximately 25 calories in 100 grams. If you cut and cook them, you're going to end up with basically the same. This is 26 calories per 100 grams, so it's a tiny little bit more calories because some's going to evaporate in the cooking process. And then you're going to start to slightly concentrate it now by going into tomato passata, and this is now 33 calories per 100 grams. So as you see, each stage of the processing increases calorie density. And then we go to tomato puree, and we're now at 96 calories per 100 grams. So it's 3 times the calorie density of passata. And then the next level we go to ketchup, and this is now 102 calories per 100 grams. So tomato puree and tomato ketchup are very similar in their calories, but the calories come from different molecules. There's lots of sugar in here on top of the sugar that's already in the tomatoes. Vinegar and the spices don't really have any calories, so all the calories in ketchup are basically from sugar. Tiny little bit of protein. How much protein is in here? 1.2% protein, which is almost nothing. And then when you process soybeans, if you don't take into account these steps, if you just go from soybean to here, then in here you've got carbohydrates, you've got proteins, you've got fibre, and you've got a tiny little bit of fat, not a huge amount of fat. And then you're processing it to remove most of the nutrients and just leaving the protein which you want. So this is now 50% protein, and I think it's got like 20% of fibre, so there's still some fibre in here. Whereas tofu, in 100 grams of tofu, there is 12% protein. So here's 12% protein, and that's processed to make 50% protein. And then a further stage of processing gets to almost 100% protein. I don't think that people should be eating large quantities of highly processed food, because your body is made of cells that need complete nutrition in order to rebuild. If you're removing all the nutrition and just taking one component of that plant, then you're missing out on all the other nutrients that were in there. All the vitamins and minerals, they're all gone. You're just taking the pure protein. And yes, you need protein to build muscles and repair tissues and everything else in your body. Your whole body is basically made of protein. But if you get that protein from a source that's as close to the original as possible, you also get the nutrition. If you're going to eat pure sugar, and I've got some examples of sugars here. So here's a absolutely pure white sucrose. This is sucrose is a disaccharide. It means it's got two molecules of sugar joined together. So it's a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule bound together to make a sucrose molecule. So when you eat it, it very, very quickly will be turned into glucose and fructose. Glucose is absorbed by every single cell in your body and your brain. Every cell is built to work on glucose. Fructose, you need to process it first in your liver to turn it into glucose or into fat. If you eat too much sugar, then your body is not able to burn it off, and then it's going to get taken down to the liver and then converted into fat. And that's why people get fatty liver disease, because they're eating far too much and their body just can't burn it quick enough. And so the only thing the body could do to get the blood sugar down is to turn it into something else, so it turns it into fat. The process of doing that is a little bit complicated. Biochemistry pathways are very, very difficult to understand for normal people, so I'm not going to go into the details of those processes. But you can see these two sugars are different. This is a little bit more sticky, and it's a slightly brown colour, but it's still a super highly processed food. You couldn't make this in your kitchen very easily. So if you're gonna eat these, this is basically a pure chemical, as close as you can get to. This is a pure chemical, this is a slightly impure chemical, but there's zero nutrition. There's absolutely zero, it's just energy. So if you need energy, then great, eat sugar and burn it. If you're going to go to the gym, then having a little bit of sugar before the gym is going to give you the energy, immediate energy to do the workout that you're trying to do. And then you have a different type of sugar. This is basically dates, whole dates, just liquidized. So this is a whole food, but it's still a sweetener. So instead of taking this and then extracting everything out of the dates and just leaving the sugar, this is just liquidized dates that have been concentrated into a squeezable liquid. So this is a whole food. So it includes all the vitamins and minerals and all the other components that are in the original fruit, and then it's just basically liquidized. So the only processing is basically being blended, which just takes the job of your teeth and makes it more efficient. So this is still a whole food, but it's not, and it's a processed food, but it's still a whole food. So the terminology can be a bit confusing for some people. Not all processed foods are going to be bad for you, and not all raw foods are going to be good for you. There are some things you really shouldn't eat raw. For example, kidney beans are a little bit poisonous if you eat them raw, so they have to be boiled and they have to be pressure cooked in order to make them into an edible form. And there are a lot of people that say, oh, there's lots of anti-nutrients in fruits and vegetables, because the plant doesn't want to be eaten and therefore makes chemicals in the plant to defend itself against predators. This is true in some respects with some plants. There are some plants that produce toxins in order to prevent them being eaten, but the whole point of a fruit, the plant makes a fruit because it wants to be eaten. Why would it go to all the energy to make this if it didn't want to be eaten? Because the tomato plant's going to die. This is how the tomato plant reproduces. It's how it has sex. So it builds these juicy, squishy things full of its DNA for its seeds in order for an animal to come along and go, oh, that looks tasty, I'm going to eat that. The animal eats it, the seeds pass through the animal and then get passed out into somewhere in nature, and that seed has a chance to generate a new plant which will make more fruit, which will make the plant evolve and also nourish the animal at the same time. So, the next level up from a processed food, it now becomes a man-made chemical. So, when you buy something in a shop, if you look at the ingredients, does it include things that you would have in your kitchen? And when looking at this is tomato concentrate, vinegar, sugar, salt, and just some spices, some celery and pepper, a few other. I'm sure they don't list every flavouring they add to it. So I could make a version of ketchup because I can buy these processed chemicals in a shop. I can buy acetic acid, I can buy sucrose, so I could make it myself. But to make the acetic acid and to make the sucrose requires a plant to do that. Another very controversial chemical is this little bit of magic. This is monosodium glutamate, which is a lot of people say this is a horrible, terrible food. But what is MSG? Which is chemical, it's a pure chemical, it's man-made, we make it in a factory. It's a sodium ion, Na+, and a glutamate ion. Glutamate is basically a glutamic acid, it's amino acid. In your body, glutamate and glutamic acid are one of the most common amino acids. So it's basically an amino acid that has been reacted to make salt. So if you take an acid and a base, you react the acid and the base, you get salt and water usually, or whatever combination of acid base. Yeah, you basically get a salt. This is a salt. It's used as a flavour enhancer because it really highly triggers the taste buds on your tongue, and it gives food a richer, deeper taste and makes it a million times more addictive. And food companies want you to buy their food again. So what they do is they sit around with labs of scientists to sit there and think, okay, what's the most dopamine triggering chemical that we can add to food? And there's thousands and thousands of chemicals that have been designed by people to add to food to make the food more tasty and more addictive, so you buy it again. And that has zero nutrition for you. There's no, like, if you add yellow dye number 5 to some food to make it pretty and look yellow, that doesn't help your nutrition in any way whatsoever. It's just a chemical there to make it look more appealing so that you'll eat more of it. America is terrible for food additives that are banned in the rest of the world. We have in Europe much stricter rules about what can go in food, and a lot of the food that's sold in America would be illegal to sell in Europe because the chemicals are so toxic. But the companies that make these chemicals are able to buy off whoever they want, because the whole food industry in America is basically the chemical industry now. Very little food there is actually original whole food. Even Whole Foods Market, a big supermarket chain that claims to be more healthy, half of the stuff they sell in there is man-made chemicals. So you can't say that something is a whole food if it's made with man-made chemicals. If I take this and make myself a soup with it, then it's a whole food. But if I add MSG to it, it's no longer a whole food because I'm adding a man-made chemical to it in order to make it more tasty and basically more addictive. And the fact that they put this in Chinese food and in crisps and snacks and things like that, they're putting it there because they want you to keep eating that snack. They want you to be eating more food. So they make it as sensory stimulating as they possibly can. And there's a whole list of other things they do to food in order to take the processed powders. Basically, most food is processed somehow to make powders, and then those powders are then processed into making some kind of textured product out of them, which resembles food, but it's so far from actual food because it doesn't actually contain any cells anymore. It's just textured to make it feel like it is, like an original food. And in the vegan world, we have fake meats, we have fake cheeses, we have all these other products which are highly processed. They don't possibly exist in nature. Let me just show you one for an example. So this is a Garden Gourmet chicken copy. So this is it comes in little pieces, frozen. But it looks like chicken. It has the same texture as chicken. It tastes very similar to chicken. This is actually one of the closest foods that I've had that resembles chicken. But what is it made of? Let's have a look at the ingredients, if I can read it. Okay, so it's in Czech and it's really small, so I'm going to try and read this to you. Okay, so number one ingredient is water, and the second ingredient is soya beans. So it's water, and these beans, 31.7% soybean. The next ingredient is oil. So oil is a processed food. Oil is extracted from either seeds or from olives, or mostly from seeds, but we have olive oil and coconut oil and various other types of oils, but they're all processed. It has vinegar. I don't know all these words. Flavorings. So you couldn't make this in your kitchen very easily. This is basically a factory-made product that you wouldn't be able to make at home. So this is a highly ultra-processed food. I eat these occasionally. I only buy them when they're reduced. This was 56% off, so I thought I'd buy it just to keep it in the freezer for emergency situations where I can't be bothered to make something more healthy. I don't eat a whole food plant-based diet all the time. I'd say probably 80% of what I eat is whole foods, and then the other 20% is junk food. And I do like, as you can see from the recipes on my channel, I do like to have cakes and things like that. I try to make them myself so that I can control the ingredients. So even though there is sugar in them, it's all ingredients that I know, and it's all ingredients that are natural, that your body knows how to process. If you're starting to add man-made chemicals like artificial sweeteners, artificial colours, artificial flavours, things that don't exist in nature, you don't know how they're going to affect your body. They may not have any effect on you, or they may have super toxic effects on you. You don't know, and a lot of them are not even tested. They're just added to food, and as long as they're not acutely poisonous, if you can't prove that this is actually toxic and it will kill people pretty quickly, then to prove that something is dangerous takes huge amounts of money and studies to do that. Thousands of people need to be involved. Who's going to fund that? Who's going to actually pay for this research? So a lot of these chemicals are added without any actual testing on people for long-term safety, and we have cases of even with medicines that have not been tested properly and ended up killing hundreds of thousands of people. So the fact that we have all these random chemicals that are made by people with no testing, just put in food to make it more addictive, so you buy more of this trash. And people wonder why we're so unhealthy as a race now. That chronic illness is a ticking time bomb now. So many people are living with chronic illness, and it's all about the food. If you change your diet, you can get rid of 80% of all human illness. Why is this not understood by anybody? It's not complicated, really. Try to keep as much of your food, whole food, plant-based as possible, And you will reverse heart disease, you'll reverse diabetes, you can cure cancer, you can cure autoimmune diseases, you can reduce your risk of stroke. I've not had a single infection in 9 years, whereas I used to be on antibiotics all the time. Why? Because animals are pumped with antibiotics to stop them from dying in the first 2 months of their life before they're killed anyway. But they're packed in such confined conditions that disease is absolutely rampant, and so they're all injected with antibiotics permanently every day to stop them from dying of these diseases. So you're eating all the antibiotics and all the hormones and all the other things they're giving to the animals to make the animals grow unnaturally fast. And all of that is going into your body, and you think, oh, well, it's meat, there's only one ingredient. This is so stupid. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend people, but if you think that eating a factory farmed animal is a single ingredient, it's just beef. It's not beef, it's beef. Hundreds of antibiotics and hormones and all these other chemicals needed in order to grow this animal quicker so that they can kill it as soon as possible to make as much money as they can. So the longer you feed an animal for, the more it's going to cost you to make that animal big enough to sell. So they make them artificially grow as quickly as possible by pumping them full of steroids and other drugs and loads of other things. And you're eating all of those drugs as well as the pain and the fear the animal was suffering during the time of its execution. You're absorbing all of that as well. And you wonder why people get sick. But they say, oh, meat is healthy, meat is healthy. It's absolute nonsense. Please stop talking about meat being the healthiest thing in the world. We know, we have thousands of papers that show that meat causes cancer. It's even listed as a carcinogen. Right? So, yeah, I don't know, please wake up, learn some chemistry, learn some biochemistry. I'm going to talk more about natural versus man-made in a different video, going into more details about chemistry. But yeah, for now, I'm going to try and keep this video shorter than the other ones, but just give you an idea of what I mean by whole food, processed food, and ultra-processed food, and animal food, and chemicals, which are added to make food more addictive. And if you saw my previous video about weight loss, you will now understand that most products you buy are designed to be addictive. They're designed to make you want to constantly eat them, and that have zero nutrition so that you have to eat more food. And you're just getting calories and calories and calories and zero nutrition on top, and you end up fat and sick and dying of diseases which are caused by your own actions. Bit blunt, but that's true. You're responsible for what goes in your mouth, and you're responsible for the consequences of your choices. You can blame other people, you can blame society, you can blame the chemical companies, you can blame whoever you want, but you choose to eat what you eat. And if you eat things that are bad for you and get disease because of it, then that's your fault. Because we have the knowledge now. And part of this channel is to try and share that knowledge with you, to try and help you be a healthier, happier, and just generally have a better life than you would without this knowledge. So I hope that helps clear up some nomenclature of what I'm talking about when I talk about whole foods and processed foods and chemicals. Everything is made of chemicals, but not everything is a chemical. A chemical is a specific term using chemistry to define a molecule. DNA is a defined molecule. It has a defined structure. It's a deoxyribose sugar chain with nucleotides attached to it, which stick together and form the DNA molecule. That is a chemical, but in a cell, the cell contains DNA, but the cell is not a chemical on its own. Another really important thing is someone said once that a bowl of cereal is metabolically identical to a bowl of sugar, which is absolutely nonsense. Please stop spreading nonsense. That is a complete lie. A bowl of cereal, although it's highly processed, it still contains original plant matter. It contains fiber, it contains protein, it contains fats, it contains complex carbohydrates. This is just pure sucrose. They are not the same thing. Please stop saying that, because that's just utterly stupid. It just makes no sense. It's like saying the sky is green and the grass is blue. It's just not true. So yeah, you have to be careful when talking about chemicals, because most people don't know anything about chemistry. So I want to help teach people a little bit about chemistry. This is not a chemistry degree course though, so I'm going to try and keep the topics as basic as I can so that the most people can understand it as possible. I'll deep dive a little bit into the chemistry of amino acids and sugars and fats, but I'm going to try and keep them in a practical knowledge level rather than a biochemical pathway level, because you don't need to know the fine details. If you want to know the fine details, you can look it up. Yeah, I just want to. I'm going to end it there. So you've got a rough idea of now what I mean. So if there's any questions about either chemicals, processed food, or whole foods, if you just drop the question in the comments, I will try and answer it in a future video. If there's anything that you don't understand about this one or want to know in more detail, let me know. So like and comment and share if there's anyone else who needs to know more about nutrition, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.